Perfect. Thanks, Chris. Good morning, barely everyone. Anthony Wicks here from the Chrome Enterprise team at Google UK. Pleasure to be here. I hope you've had a good set of sessions so far. A little bit on myself. I joined Google 18 months ago. I've been working in end user computing for about 5 years or so now. Prior to Google, I was at Microsoft, so very much leading on the other side of end user computing there. And yeah, I largely work with large financial institutions and manufacturers in really evaluating what end user computing is to their portfolio. So it's great to be here, and I'm joined by an amazing panel. So I'll let the panel introduce themselves, and then, as Chris says, if we have any questions throughout the session, feel free to raise them and we'll bring them up with the session. And if you do have a question for a particular person, feel free to mention that as well. That would be really helpful. So with that, I'll hand over to Tariq to introduce himself, and then perhaps Rebecca, and then Ralph. Over to you, Tariq.
Cool. Hello, everyone. I'm Tariq Maonah. I'm the digital product lead at Legal & General. Legal & General are a large financial services organisation in the UK with offices in North America and also in Asia. We focus on financial services products from retail investments through to retirement, insurance and pensions. And we also build houses, believe it or not. So we have a large homes building division as well, which fits in nicely within the retirement space. So yeah, lots to do, large digital portfolio. My focus is mainly on the digital workforce and employee experience, because with all of these businesses is trying to build a common and innovative future thinking employee experience.
Fantastic. So Rebecca?
Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Kemp and I'm Director of Customer Journey at Citizens Advice. Citizens Advice is a network of 280 independent charities, and our aim is to help people solve their problems, find a way forward, whatever is troubling them. It can be things like benefits, like employment, like housing and debt issues. So of course, COVID has been quite a roller coaster for us in terms of the changes of problems that people have been experiencing. My role is to lead the customer journey team. We contain digital design, content experts, and like lots of you, we've been getting used to remote working over the last few months.
Thank you. Ralph?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Ralf Larsson. I'm Director Online Employee Engagement and Development at Electrolux, working in communications and HR, so overall responsible for I would say our global digital channels when it comes to internal employee comms, especially supporting leaders and our businesses to really connect and engage with employees throughout. So we have roughly Electrolux, we have 50,000 employees in some 60 countries. And you know, some words about Electrolux, we are in the white appliances, not always white, but appliances business. So everything from fridges and vacuum cleaners, etc. So we have a lot of strong brands in our portfolio like AEG, Zanussi, Electrolux, etc. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ralph. Appreciate that. So I guess on the subject of remote working, it's absolutely been on the tip of everyone's tongue the last 6 months or so. It's gone from some organizations offered it as a employee benefit or perk to it's now, let's be honest, one of the most essential things in keeping a business running at the moment. So really the first question I have is probably a fairly obvious one, which is around how prepared your organizations were to actually adopt a remote working environment. Was that something that was there, or have you had to innovate to really kind of deliver that at the moment? Perhaps, Rebecca, would you like to start opening with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that we were pretty well prepared because of some of the technology that we had in place, but that is not to say that it has been easy. And it's been a big change to adopt to and has meant lots of changes in how we work and behaviours, which I'd love to dig into and share with you more during the conversation. We thinking particularly about my team, because we are generally quite comfortable with technology. We're using a lot of collaboration tools online anyway. We were pretty well set up technology-wise, but what is different is that we were used to being well set up technology-wise, but pretty much all in the same place, or most of us in the same place. So it's been a real change for us to start using that technology when we're all in different places to figure figure out how we collaborate when we're not in the same place, and how we keep that sense of team and togetherness when we're working remotely. So I would say pretty well prepared on the technology. When it comes to my team, what's been new for us is the behaviours that we need to adopt to work remotely successfully.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to go into it a little bit more detailed as the conversation goes on, but that makes a lot of sense. Ralf, Tariq, sorry, would you either of you have a comment as well?
Yeah, I just echo what you said here. So I think we were very much, ready when it comes to technology-wise, and then I think what the pandemic did was to speed things up in terms of user adoption, and we were forced to really start using the tools that we had for years. So I think it's just speeded things up, because suddenly we were, we had to use Teams, so we had to be, using our digital tools in a new way when we connected to our colleagues and working remotely. So I think it just speeded things up, but we were very much prepared, I would say.
I think in financial services as a whole, remote working, we're quite a legacy industry. Obviously, you have the rise of fintech, etc. But when you look at the incumbent banks, we're not that great at the remote working way of working. I mean, it's normally just from a compliance perspective, if you've got business continuity plans, you need to have remote working in place. But at Legal & General, I have to say, because of the way the business is set up, we've got offices in Cardiff, in Hove, Brighton area, Birmingham and Leeds. We were moving around quite a bit anyway. So we have that agile workforce, remote working policies, but we also had employment contracts for home-based workers, agile workers. So we had that in place. But yes, definitely to Ralf and Rebecca's point, it's just the heightened intensity of the scenario around the pandemic that made everyone think, right, behaviors, what are they? Everything was urgent, urgent, urgent. Are we actually working effectively? Hours went out the window, things like that. So the working patterns, things like that, it was just a situational. But from a tech perspective, we were in a good place.
Fantastic. I have to say, it's really good to hear the amount of conversations we've been having the last 6 months have not mirrored that at all. And actually, one aerospace organization I spoke to recently said the chief digital transformation officer has been trying to drive change for the last 5 or 6 years and has got more done in the last 6 months than they have done in the previous period. And it's amazing to see how people have reacted. If you've had the technology, it's been a very smooth transition out. Google, we are empowered to work anytime, anywhere, any device. So for us as a culture, it was a relatively straightforward switch. But for so many organisations, they've had to really seriously invest, not just in locally, but like across the globe, providing devices to users who previously they could never justify a device for, and it's been a real challenge. And to your point, Tariq, the financial services, you're absolutely right, and there are requirements, industry requirements, why things have been slightly slower to adopt certain technologies like the cloud. But it's been really interesting to see that transition happen. Not so much so quickly, it's been happening for a while, but really accelerating in the last 6 months. And I think the biggest bit of feedback I've actually had, and it kind of quite neatly segues into the next question I have for you all, is around actually that engagement. Because deploying technology itself is a challenge. It always has been, and almost certainly always will be, albeit to a lesser degree in the future. But really engaging employees and fostering that culture of collaboration is a real challenge. I know my leadership team have been constantly trying to engage us with things like baking competitions, things like virtual drinks and things like that. And it's hard to do. It really is hard to do when everyone's everywhere. So I guess my next question for you is, in terms of the hardware, the tools, the technology you had in place, how has that been able to drive employee engagement and really foster that community spirit? Who'd like to
I'm quite interested to hear from Rebecca and Ralf on this, because obviously, Ralf, you're in the HR space, Rebecca, you're in the customer journey space. But from a digital product perspective, it's interesting because this is the biggest experiment where we've been able to show that it's these layers it's not just the tech, it's not just the product and the journey, it's how you do the messaging, it's how you know, the nudge theory, the sentiment, all of that. There's so many variables here. And what we found is that you can't be very parent-child, if that makes sense, as an employer broadcasting one way to an employee. It's suddenly changed. So if you didn't have the two-way communication where you actually had a loop with your employees already, and if you were literally just broadcasting out as the voice of the employer once a week saying this is our news, and you know, if you didn't have that, it must have been a big change. I mean, for us, we went through a change in that particularly, but it's really now organically become very informal and two-way and very authentic, and I'm sure you can both add to that. But we found that we had to change our communication style, the frequency of communication, you know, the channels in which we do that. It was a real shift for us.
If I may start, Rebecca, I think what we did very early on, I think we created a task force within HR, comms, and IT, because I think we need to work closely together to support the business here. So we started by providing webinars throughout the company on everything from how to communicate, in a virtual setup, how to work as a manager, how to connect with your teams, etc., in a good way, and with a few different topics with a huge take up. So I think that was one way to, and of course, getting input on what are the pain points that we need to address. So it was not about technology, because I think that's, of course, it works a few glitches in the beginning, but I think it was more around how to really utilize it in the best way when we can't meet physically, because usually, right, the biggest piece in the communication is body language, and you lose that if you're sitting in a virtual environment. And how can you compensate that when you actually have a virtual setup? So I think we've been exploring a lot, and we've been evolving everyone from our group management also to showcase, ways of working and in a fun and informal way, because I think we should really stress it's about us, right? Working smarter together. So
what you say there, Ralf, really resonates with me. And one thing that my management colleagues and I have been working on in the customer journey team is about how do we actually keep continuity with some of the things that we've always been doing, or we've been doing for a while as a team. Because I think the temptation can be, when we're working remote, especially at the beginning of the pandemic and where we were in the strictest lockdown, where everything was so overwhelming, confusing in our lives, never mind in terms of the clients that we're dealing with, who are also experiencing a lot of challenge and change. I think there can be an impulse to just sort of hunker down and maybe stop doing some of the in-person things that we've been doing. But what we decided to do was kind of try and keep those rhythms in place for the team, but change them for an online environment. So we had every month we would have a kind of all hands meeting in person. And we've actually kept that, but we're doing it now online. It's shorter, it has more breaks. We try and mix up the format as much as we can in terms of videos and polls and group discussions, and as much as we can to try and create time for people to be together. And also now we specifically include things that that actually try and foster people being together, but not really focusing on work so much. So we will include in those times, people to do activities, but they're pretty casual, pretty informal, to try and let people have those kind of moments that they would have had in the office that they're not so easy to get now.
We did find some gaps actually to that point. So we found like you might have the hardware that gets you online and the remote setup for you just to work, but we missed that, to your point, those natural collisions, those organic collisions you get in the office. And we found that actually, even though they're borderless now, that we're all virtual, there's no kind of physical borders as such, which opened up doors. We did find that people did start to work a little bit in silos, and to your point, hunker down there, Rebecca, what you said there. And we found that we had a gap in that space where we could use virtual whiteboards, which we didn't have in the organization, where we're trying to get people to ideate more, come together, share ideas. So we had to very quickly spin up new technology to help productivity in that space. And those are the nuances that throughout the months and even now we're trying to find, how do we make these tools more day-to-day friendly? How do we enable people to turn those ideas into outcomes, especially in an agile way of working? We had to move everyone to agile, and we've got quite a large workforce that are multi-generational, very different workforce. So you've got people who are digital natives, people who aren't, and it's how do you get them all operating at a benchmark level? That's the biggest challenge, I think, for remote workers.
And one more thing, I think it's very important that I think within HR that we do send out, we send pulse surveys, so we regularly kind of check with our employees, are they, how is their physical health, how do they feel mentally and engaged, and if we can spot things early on. And it's also a way for employees to really shout out if it's anonymously if something is not okay. So I think for HR, I think it's even more important that they work constantly with employees in smart ways to pick up those what is happening out there.
Really interesting. Actually, just on one point that was made, so not nodding away the whole way through, but one thing you said about the natural collisions, Tariq. So over the last few months, you may not have seen I think Google's been quite open with its return to office culture updates. In fact, normally I get an update from my parents who have seen a news report about it before I've even seen it. But one of the things they've been saying is, we're not originally we weren't expecting to be back into the office until early January. That's now actually shifted out to largely July next year. But one thing that's been very interesting is the fact that the leadership and our CEO, Sundar Pichai, he's been very clear to say we're never going to move to a complete work from home culture, as in everybody doing it. Exactly to your point, Tariq, around those natural collisions. So Google's got something like 9 billion user products, so YouTube, Gmail, and so on. The interesting thing is Gmail, for example, came from 2 very different program managers, technical program managers, meeting in a coffee queue over in Mountain View. And it was just a natural conversation while they were waiting, saying, do you know what, email isn't working for us. I wonder if we could do better. And that, as part of the kind of innovation culture we try to foster at Google, that is exactly why we cannot and will not to a permanently remote working culture, because it is those moments of just coming together and really sparking imagination where people ideate, as you say, and create amazing things. So it's really interesting that you touched on that point, and wholly agree with trying to foster that moving forward. So in terms of, I guess, enabling remote working has been a necessity for most organizations. Have you seen any kind of inherent benefits, like performance benefits, to the organization? So maybe either being able to contact or offer more support to more people, in your case, Rebecca, or winning new business, Tariq and Ralf?
I'm happy to start this one. So yeah, we've seen a pretty substantial increase of use of our digital advice. So citizensadvice.org.uk, we provide advice on all sorts of topics that's designed to help people kind of in the moment when they have a problem. It's very actionable, the kind of content that we provide there. And we saw an increase very quickly of about 40% use of that year on year. And we also saw the topics that people were looking for changing very rapidly. So and what digital and agile ways of working let us do was really respond to things quickly. And when I say quickly, I do mean quickly. So we would see a spike in our traffic between 5 and 9 p.m. each evening, which is after the Prime Minister had given his address, which he was doing nightly to the country in the early days of lockdown. We would see people searching first, people were interested in kind of consumer knock-on effects of COVID. So, what if their flights are cancelled? What do they do about a holiday that they've booked? Then very soon it moved to thinking about what if you can't pay your bills? What is what is furlough? What redundancy rights do I have? All these kind of things. The topics were changing very, very quickly in what people were using on our site. And because, of course, digital technology can scale in a way that we can't scale face-to-face advice, particularly in our current circumstances, that was a great benefit to us in that we were able to help more people and keep helping them through the pandemic. Looking internally, for me, there's been a bit of an unexpected benefit, and that's to people who have long-term been home workers, some of whom I have in my team. And I think a challenge for being a home worker when you are in an organisation that isn't predominantly home working and is mainly office based is that you can feel perhaps a bit cut off. You might always feel like you're the kind of odd one out in a meeting, or be the one saying, hang on, I can't hear what's going on in the workshop, and so on. And what we found is that for our home workers, they're feeling much more involved and much more like they're participating from a position of equality with the rest of the team now that we are all remote. So that's kind of two benefits for us, for the service we provide, the way that technology has enabled us to scale, and the way that agile and digital ways of working and user-centered design have let us respond very quickly to the changing needs of the population. And secondly, internally, the fact that our home workers are feeling much more that like they're operating on an equal footing.
Fantastic.
Right. If one big change is that I think the Stockholm food menu for people working at the headquarters is no longer visited because no one is eating in the cantina. That's one obvious one. No, but kidding. We see big, I think, increase, of course, in using the digital tools. So some of the, for instance, we use Teams for meetings and and chatting. We see like a 1,300 percent increase or just over the last couple of few months, right? So I think, of course, that's we use it a lot. What we also do, and we see an increase as well, is that we have some public Yammer groups where we connect with employees regarding questions and how to use the tools. And we recently started a kind of a pilot community where anyone can sign up to be a guinea pig when it comes to new technology, because we're moving faster and faster. And there we see a big increase of willingness to participate from all the countries. So don't see that many tickets, but it's more of a dramatic increase in using the tools and also willingness to participate and learn it and be advocates locally where they work. So I think that is great.
I think also from our perspective, we've got very separate businesses, and they're almost like independent businesses running with separate operating models. Whether you're in investments, insurance, or retail, pensions, or construction, it's all very segregated. And what the remote working technologies enabled us to do is break all of those barriers down, because we don't have those silos now. So COVID response was very much a cross-functional response where we all did that together. The decision-making was done cross-functionally, and the remote working technology enabled us to almost delegate decision-making down effectively and giving people more autonomy. And I think that's one of the benefits we've had. We've got people now feeling empowered, enthused, and enabled with the technology to be able to do what they need to do. And to Ralph's point as well, we're very Microsoft heavy. We use Teams, Office 365, but we also use things like the Power Platform, Power Apps, things like that, where people can actually create their own journeys without even needing to know code. So they can do that now. We've got the capabilities there for people to just really start making their jobs a lot more efficient and effective. So we've done, in that respect, we've broken down silos. And the second one is the transparency, really. We find that because we're now more online, everything's been done online, and we're communicating more, we really understand what everyone's up to in a bit more detail. We can work more cross-functionally as well. We're kind of getting this whole internal gig economy concept going on here, where, you know, I might spot someone's doing some work in a division where I say, actually, we've got people with great skills that can help you out there. And I think that's the model going forward, which we're going to try and explore in the future workspaces. How do we make us more of a pool rather than segregated businesses, a pool of skills that can, you know, switch and scale based on the way the business needs us to. And to Rebecca's point on that customer service piece, that was a massive change for us. We have a very legacy contact center style, you know, approach to customer service. During the pandemic, moving forward, it was a lot of vulnerable customers needed our support, especially with their finances and their financial wellness. And we had to enable all of that contact center workforce to work from home. And I'm sure, Rebecca, you've had the same challenge as well. And that in itself is a mammoth task, you know, and that I don't think we'll go back to the traditional contact centers, but it's making us really think about our operating models now. Like with this remote technology, can we start thinking about how we shape our operating models?
And to that point, I think that, you know, we don't travel. So I think we have one, it's not a challenge, but I think we need to advocate for, especially for the leadership, how to use the tools for, if you can't meet physically, to have an innovation workshop in Brussels, or, okay, how can you do that digitally, right? So I think that's one challenge going forward, because this is not going away. So, and also we feel that when we look at the result from the Pulse service, that employees really like to work remotely, and in some areas it was not really okay, but now it's kind of a new standard. So I think everyone really acknowledged that this is kind of the new normal, that we will work more remotely, maybe not 100%, but to a large extent, and we actually see some great benefits from it, reduce travel costs, etc. So I would say it's a new normal.
Absolutely, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to invoke my moderation powers here, and I'm going to flip the next two questions. I think you've kind of segued nicely into the question. So one of the challenges most organizations have said, certainly IT organizations have said about the business, and I'm sure the business areas would say the same about IT, is really both sides engaging each other to really deliver what is a good end user experience. There's always this perception that something will be said, the business will say, I want this. Then the IT team will hear that and either interpret it and deliver exactly what's been asked, and that wasn't right, or it will get misinterpreted sometimes and be delivering something else. How have you seen what's the focus been like on the user experience? And also, are you seeing a different style or desire to engage for both parties to engage to really innovate on or iterate on that experience you're giving them?
I'd like to go first on this one, purely because it lends well to my role. I mean, that's why my role exists. It's basically taking that consumerized customer experience and bringing it inwards. So what I would have done previously in the retail banking space for, you know, mobile app journeys, for example, or, you know, investment journeys, I'm doing that for the employee. And it's really, really critical. And I've spoken about this in many of Chris's presentations and conferences, but it's so important that, for example, if IT roll out a big change like Windows 10, they get everyone on a new platform, you know, they come out with all of this jargon that they expect everyone to understand, like you're going to have a faster processor, you're going to get this, blah, blah. But really, with the employee experience lens, you're actually saying you're going to work smarter, you're going to be able to be more efficient, you can track what you're doing. So really focusing on the user, the employee in this, and that's been brought front and center with this whole future of work piece and what's going on now, because that consumerized experience you get from Google, Amazon, Apple is what people expect in their day-to-day workplace, right? And that's why the digital product scene in the employee experience space is growing, and why roles like ours exist now. So I do think it's quite critical that you take that same level of customer experience internally as well.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. It's the question of what's in it for me. Why should I adopt this? What am I going to get for it? And as you say, there's a lot of great flashy words and marketing terms that we can kind of throw at a user. But really, if you tell them, do you know what, you're not going to need to carry a power pack around with you for the rest of the day. Your bag's going to be lighter. Your device is going to boot in 10 seconds, etc., etc. That is more interesting than you're going to be more secure. What does that mean? it really is about finding out for them what's important. So, Rebecca, Ralf, what's your view?
I would echo what Tariq has said so far, and add a couple of points which you would probably expect from someone who runs a digital and design team, and that is the benefit of user-centered design processes. And we are at Citizens Advice blessed with end user computing and technology infrastructure teams who are really excellent and very much embedded in the business. And with that, I would say also the value of multidisciplinary teams and co-design. So as we're thinking as an organisation and as a team about what's next for us in terms of ways of working, we're really prioritising getting all areas of the organisation involved. So people who are technology specialists, people who are not. And I think having that blend is key. So you're not having a situation where, you know, requirements are created, then they are tipped over to a technology team who may or may not interpret them in the same way, and then eventually something is shot out. It's more about having that blend, having those multidisciplinary teams, and having quick cycles of iteration, or as quick as you can get them.
Makes sense.
To echo a bit what I think we've been talking about already, but I think using digital like this and working remotely, actually in some ways you get closer to each other and you working kind of on the same. And I think our colleagues in IT have never been closer to the business than they are today, right? So I mentioned this pilot community invitation that everyone can sign up and join this to test new technology. I think because it's also that our colleagues in IT understand what language our employees are using, and when they're testing and they spot things early on before actually. So it's more like we work together on things, and so that's why I think that HR, IT, and comms really, when it comes to the employee experience, I really need to work together and see that, you know, it's because the earlier we can spot things and adjust things for a greater benefit, the better, right? So we see new roles for our colleagues in IT that it's more business partners working in the business than separately as before. So and of course that goes to everything from user acceptance testing or testing proof of concepts, and it's and we see that employees are more willing to participate now than before, because now it's even more important, and it's also an opportunity to you know collect with colleagues and join meetings that you not normally join, right? Because you are into a pilot or what have you. So we are social creatures. So I think for me this is a win-win.
I've just had an interesting question in. I won't read it word for word, but essentially, how are you collectively deciding or determining what's important to a huge broad set of users in different geographies and different roles? How are you identifying and prioritizing what is important to them to fix and improve in this time? Is it surveys? Is it roundtables? How are you doing that?
All of that. No, but I think we have a governance set up that IT, comms, and HR. We have an overall steering in the company. We had that for years, so we have a natural way of working together on this, right? So and then we get I would say this triangle to steer globally, and then if you can mirror that in the regions, I think then of course you can pick up things faster, and we can take better decisions together, because it's usually not an isolated IT question or comms question or HR question. It's a combined. So that's one thing. And then we do everything from surveys to focus groups to all the ways, and of course having metrics on the daily usage of stuff. So I can quickly go in and see how is the team's adoption in North America or in the headquarters in Stockholm. And we can see that, well, the team's adoption is actually behind Charlotte, and what are they doing in Charlotte that we're not doing in Stockholm? And then we can quickly, get together and say, wow, okay, you did that. So I think having that measurement piece for the digital tools is super important, and you get that granularity, so you quickly can slice down on the site level and looking into the different channels. And there you also see I think, the adoption and engagement, because you see where we're starting getting spikes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not one size fits all, right? There's no such thing as one size fits all. And we found that the best way to move forward is through principles, having very rigid design principles from the employee experience perspective that everyone adheres to. You know, if you're hitting those as a baseline, you prioritize against those. We make sure that in all of our territories, everyone's aligned to a core set of principles, core set of working and a way of prioritizing, and that then the nuances will exist within the different territories there. What we do have is feedback loops that we use to feedback in terms of the mechanisms that you've mentioned here in terms of surveying, or it could be working groups, but we also use very open forums as well. We use virtual whiteboards, things like this as well. So if anyone has an innovative idea or they've got a problem that needs to be solved, you can go on a very public board that is then triaged and can be worked on in that fashion. So we've got lots of different ways for employees to kind of get information up the loop. But the key for us here is making sure decision-making power doesn't sit too far up the chain. And that's the traditional model. And that's where, if you want to act on these territory-based problems or, you know, bespoke nuances, you need decision-making powers to be further down the chain. And that's all part of the agile principles, ways of working, that you give autonomy to your teams. And I think that's the thing that I think the future C-suite need to think about now, is now that we're in this way of working, you know, you need to kind of think about that decision-making model and empowering employees more to make that change.
I support what's been said. I have a couple of points of nuance, which are really about how can we make sure that we're truly working as collectives in our organisation. I think it can be maybe a bit easy to oversimplify with this kind of thing, you know, particularly because everyone's looking for success at this time, around, you know, how remote working is great, and all those things are true. However, I wouldn't necessarily say that remote working is great for everyone in every circumstance. So I feel like part of my role as a leader is to make sure that we're encouraging diverse voices. So colleagues that are on my mind, for example, are those of whom who perhaps are younger, who are more junior in the organisation, and who are working in flat shares, or people who have been shielding during the pandemic. So for me, there's something really important about making sure we're hearing from all parts of the organisation. And yes, we're looking at data, but also we're making sure we're keeping that qualitative information in there and being aware of people who have experiences that are different from the mainstream. No one size fits all, as you said, Tariq. And I would also say that for some people, talking about this kind of thing and their needs is more comfortable one-to-one. So we've been having a real focus on our line management relationships, on our one-to-ones, particularly making sure we're having conversations about well-being so that we can really understand people's needs and their experiences of home working in the round, technology being part of that, but also what has it been like for them in their working lives and their lives more generally, and then making sure that we feed that stuff up. We talk about it as managers, as a group of leaders, again, to make sure that we are looking at the data, but we're also making sure we're understanding people's qualitative experiences.
Yeah, I think there's a general shift away from decision by committee, because I think decision by committee can often lead to quite stifling of innovation. So, I mean, to that point there, in the question raised by someone in the audience is that, you know, try the best way to move forward is to move away from that model and have a real set of principles and guidance that really focus on the employee or the user, the end user. You know, if you're putting the end user first and prioritizing against that, then decision by committee should fade away, really should be irrelevant.
Sense.
Can I challenge that a little bit? I think we still need, I think when we take decisions, we need to take decisions together in our case, it's we talk about IT, HR, comms when it comes to kind of big changes. But what I've seen a change is that they all talk about the user experience, Right. So when we take the decision, we will not take a decision unless we really have great input from employees, doing user testing and getting, really doing that properly, looking at all employees, looking depending on what kind of persona they have or what role they have. So that has changed. But when we take the decision, I think we still need to work together within across the functions, so we take the right decision
across the functions and with data, I guess, data driven
with the right data. With employees first.
Actually, I'm gonna throw in another moderator power question here. So this is a real challenge for a lot of my customers. Some have been better at it than others. I think it largely depends on their adoption of cloud. One of the challenges they have is really profiling user groups, understanding from an experience standpoint, an application requirement standpoint, certainly on the hardware as to what kind of hardware they need, if there's any accessibility challenges, things like that. They will all use a plethora of tools, insights, and get user engagement, stuff like that. If you're speaking to an organization who admittedly knew they needed to improve on this and had no idea where to start, do you have a starting point of how you would go and profile those user groups?
If I start, I would say make sure you have good data, because you need to know, have good data about the employees, usually coming from the HR system, and that data needs to be available so you can really utilize that data and look into roles, functions, experience, who they are, where they work, etc. Because if you have that data, it's actually our employees. You can slice that. So that's one way. And then, of course, you can run studies to look into how employees are actually working. If you're working in finance, you're probably more focused in some tools, and you're more looking into, you have a different ways of working. If you're working comms HR, you love Jammer, that kind of stuff. So of course, when we run studies like that within Electrolux, we usually come up with, I would say, 6-7 different personas, and that doesn't change that much, because I think the work is quite different depending what you're working with, right? So and colleague working with manufacturing and the factory floor is quite different from me working with communications on group level. So I think understanding the employees, having the great data, and do the work, then you can get good personas.
Nice. Anything to add, Rebecca or Tariq? I appreciate it was a random question I threw in.
No, I think, people data, 100%. You can't. That's right. Ralph's right. The people data needs to be right, and that's where often many organizations fall flat, because they don't treat their customer data the same way they're treating their people data internally. And I think also you've got to, like Ralph said, augment your people data, probably look at skills, things like that. Try and build. I mean, what we're doing at Legal & General is we're building almost people profiles, a bit like LinkedIn, but internal ones where you can put your projects, your skills, your hobbies. So we really get to know people, but then also it makes everyone connect easier for products or for work or for projects. So we're trying to build that sort of mentality where you have your almost personal brand, which will help with the people data space completely. So yeah, I completely agree with what Ralph said there.
And just to add to that, I think you need to create different user experiences, of course, based on what you get. So, and then you also need to tie into the processes. So let's say you have the recruitment process and you hire a new employee. Of course, a new hire should be treated differently from one that's been using your digital tools for 10 years, right? So because they should be onboarded into HR content and whatever, digital channels and learn when to use what, etc. So I think we need to be better at personalize the experience, personalized and based on who we are and where you are currently. So that's super important.
And that's the rise of the digital adoption platform. So the DAP platforms now, you see there's a whole landscape of them now where they take people, a bit like car sat nav, taking you from A to B. Now it's taking employees through their entire journey. So, we're exploring using tools like WalkMe to help us through these kind of digital adoption challenges. And it's going to be the future, really, guiding people everything through self-service.
Exactly.
One thing I'll say, Tariq, and this is, you may already be doing it. We have those profiles at Google. If you want them to be feverishly adopted, do badges. You wouldn't believe the culture at Google. People will go and collect badges. It'll be from attending things like compliance training, from my name having a prime number of letters, silly random things like that. And honestly, it is, no pun intended, badge of honor. So if you want people to do that, I can promise you right now it works. It's quite. Then again, it might be a googly thing. I don't know, but it definitely works. So I guess I'm mindful of time here. So I think really I'll probably ask one more question, then a final wrap up one, assuming we have time. So obviously a lot of organizations have reacted in certainly the Q2 of this year and into the summer. There's been some holiday. Everybody seems to be coming back now, and the board and the leadership teams are starting to go, right, we've done the new normal. What's the next normal? Where's our strategy going with remote working? What is this something that could sustain? What do we need to innovate on? What's possibly going to block it? What's your I guess collective thoughts on what are you considering now, and what are you thinking about moving forward? Rebecca,
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy to start on this one. Yes, we are grappling with that, and I have to say I can't tell you the answers for us or for anyone else yet, because we're working it through. There are a couple of themes for me. One is about thinking about the blend. So if we are moving around with a bit more freedom, if people are returning to be in workspaces, how do we then manage a mix? I talked about how we've gone from, at least in my team, most of us in the office, most of us in one place, then to all remote, and that being a change for lots of us, but really a really good experience for our home workers. So for me, the big question is how do we work in a way that's more blended, but in a way that is truly inclusive, so that encourages people, it involves people who are still home workers and at home all the time, people who are in the office occasionally, people who are at home but want to get together for workshops, say, or for sprint planning. So that for me is the big question: is how do we find a way that's more blended, that is really functional, and also not just how do we do this as a leadership team, although of course that lots of it does fall to me and my leadership team colleagues, but how can we do that as a collective? So how can we do that in a way which, to my previous point, makes sure all the voices are heard and all the different experiences in the organisation, some of which are perhaps less likely to be experienced personally by a leadership team?
Yeah, I think for us, we are moving much more into this consumerized. Our next step is really mimicking what you see in those e-commerce journeys or in those brand loyalty with certain retailers, where we're going to really ramp up nudge theory, a lot of the way we talk to employees, the way we nudge them, but also giving employees choice. Do I want to be contacted through phone? Do I want my mobile app notifications? Do I want my emails? So we're trying to move towards giving employees what they want. Everyone will have a virtual assistant. We're working on some AI properties at the moment to give everyone a level of assistance that just is going to be the standard for everyone working from home now, moving away from admin tasks, getting everyone to think more about automation and efficiency in their work. And we think creativity and innovation is part of every role, whether you're in a contact center, whether you're in an innovation team, it should be part of every role. So we're really moving towards that sort of way of working. And for us, remote working is working from anywhere. As you mentioned, Anthony, it's not just working from home. So the challenges around that we'll have to resolve as well, whether it's bring your own device or a company device. But security is a big issue for us as well in that space.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'm probably going to ask a follow-up question on security in a minute, but I agree with everything you just said. Ralf, any thoughts?
Yeah, we're now, I think, looking into how to re-energize the business now when we get back to the new normal, but still working from home. Because I think when you're working from home, it's like you lose a little bit of the energy you get from when you actually meet physically, at work, right? So and also the fact that we have, we're still in the pandemic, but I think we need to also have of course a business focus. So finding ways to kind of using, everything from storytelling to what we do is to re-energize. The other one is how to constantly drive change through a digital setup now when we can't physically travel and meet, right? So as I said earlier on, like normally we fly to a city and we meet for a 1 day to workshop and we come up with an action plan and then bye. Okay, now we need to replace that using our own tools. So that won't come by itself. So it's about exploring, learning, advocating, and then also working really closely with our leadership team. So they do it right. But I think we need to dare to test. We need to explore more.
Yeah,
those two items.
Actually, the funny thing you touch on, I don't expect your heart to bleed for a sales guy at all, but that's been one of the challenges in the lockdown. So I've had customers come to me and gone, I need loads of Chromebooks, help me out right now. We've already been having a conversation. There's been lots of organizations, though, who we will meet and have a great one-to-one or one-to-many conversation. We'll scope it out and we'll have a really good plan. The challenge I'm finding at the moment is really driving that change and commitment to exactly your point, Ralf. Normally, I would say, hey, come into the Google office, we'll have a bit of lunch, and here's the Google. Here, oh, yeah, that's a telephone box. Yeah, I don't know why it's in the office either, all that kind of standard stuff. But actually driving that change and commitment off the back of it, really difficult at this point. People jump in and out of these virtual calls, and we'll do it today. We'll have this session, and then I bet you the three of you have got a load more sessions for the rest of the day with different colleagues and peers. And right now, that is a real challenge for people is delivering on the things that they commit to. So I just think I wanted to comment on that because that's something I've observed as someone who's engaging lots of external organizations at the moment. So one question I did have on security, and I don't want to wrap up on security. I've been told we've got a little bit more time, but in terms of security, that's gone from something that it was someone who would be in the corner of an office, that's a security person, go talk to them, to elevating to a management, leadership, and then basically a C-suite conversation. How are your organizations adjusting your security postures to facilitate remote working? What have you had to do?
I mean, within financial services, we're heavily regulated as it is, and security has always been a blocker for innovation, if I'm frank. I mean, for all of us, we've always used compliance and regulation as a blocker, and it's no different here, really, with the remote working. It can go, I've seen organizations go two ways. So you have the heavily surveillanced organization where they don't trust their employees and they're monitoring keystrokes and activity on the screen, things like that. And then you've got the opposite where it's kind of being quite free reign, and you've got employees kind of just creating shadow IT and just doing what they want to, work around problems. So there's these real polarized views at the moment on this. I think for us, the key is always you have to put security first, of course, your company's liabilities. But at the same time, you need to give employees that flexibility. For us at Legal and General, we had to make the decision that, with bring your own device, it's a lot less safer for us because of the nature of the documents, the financial information, customer data we have. It made sense for us to use company devices and maybe provide more devices, invest in devices that way, so that we can quickly wipe, for example, if something was to happen, as opposed to bring your own device. So we've always had that battle there with can I use my personal mobile, for example, versus my, a company mobile. And it's been a challenge for us there, for sure.
Yeah, and actually, that's a really good point. I have fairly strong opinions on bring your own device. It's something that has been talked about since the term consumerization of IT started rolling around about 8 years ago. I think from a mobile perspective, it makes sense. I'm seeing it's interesting. I'll be interested if the audience is seeing this as well. I quite often see organizations go, we're going to use BYOD laptops or devices because ultimately we kind of shift the accountability to the user. And we've all kind of said it on the call today. Users aren't technologists. They kind of just want to get the job done. They don't really care what they're using. They just want to get at their apps and their bits. And actually, very timely, this is not a plant. I actually had Google IT furnish me with a new device this morning. So I'm going to plug this in this afternoon. But really, the security of that has got to be paramount, and it's such a tight consideration, because if you have to keep layering on more surveillance, more security, it makes the user experience worse. And actually, it's a little bit creepier almost when it's in your home. You kind of wonder, you go, well, okay, how much is my work and environment looking at me and what I'm doing? So that's interesting, and I'm definitely seeing that in financial institutions.
Yeah, we've had a real redefining the contract with the employee, because to your point, it is the contract with the employee. You're more accountable. In the office, it's a ring-fenced environment. At home, my children could hear what I'm talking about. They could hear facts or figures, or someone on the phone could see, hear something, or, someone walking past could see my screen. So it's very different. You have to really have those principles and the contract with the employee defined up front. I'm sure the others on the call have had similar conversations, but that's where we're going in this direction with security, rather than putting heavy surveillance on devices.
Yeah.
I think the good news, is that I would say our management will acknowledge that we need to take the investments, and we've taken the investments that you need to take to really have strong security but a great user experience. And I think the signals we get is that we need to keep investing in this, because this is a new normal. We're working from home, and we need to have a great user experience and also great security. So I think the good news is that we're willing to spend money on this, which is important. Because otherwise, you might end up with great security, but a crappy experience, or vice versa.
Careful, Ralf. Don't say you want to spend money with salesperson on the call. That's a dangerous thing. And actually, shameless plug. I know that the whole session, the whole days in partnership with Pro Enterprise, that's really where we've been helping customers. One of my biggest customers is a retail bank, one of the major big four ones. They've deployed best part of 10, 12,000 Chrome devices as a choose your own device, as a remote working solution. So I know I'm not going to repeat all of the sessions. I'm sure are bookending this, but it's something that we're seeing, and we're helping customers do at scale. And it's, for so many organizations, it's users who they've never been able to justify a digital presence or digital experience for before. And it's really, how do you introduce that in the most simple, straightforward, secure way possible? So definitely something that we've been working on. So I think we're kind of pretty much nearly at time. So I'm going to wrap up with Jerry Springer's final last thoughts, I think, from everyone. I think that my final comment at the moment is, to your point earlier, Rebecca, I personally, I'm as I'm sure you can tell, I'm quite extroverted, and I've found it quite challenging myself working from home. I miss meeting customers. I miss having maybe the occasional after work beer with a customer and having real conversations and shaking hands and things. So for me, I'm keen to return to the office, but not every day like it probably was before. We're starting to do surveys internally at Google. I don't think I could probably share the actual statistics, but I was honestly stunned by the amount of people, how low the amount of people have said of 100,000+ seat organization, how many want to come back into the office immediately. It was quite staggering, and I think this is gonna really shake up the way Google works moving forward, and I think it's going to have a profound impact for everyone. So my last question to you is, what's any inspired recommendations you have for organizations that are listening today that on how they could approach, or how you're going to approach the next 6 to 12 months remote working and going back into the office?
If I start, of course, I work in Sweden, so we're a little bit liberal when it comes to how to tackle the pandemic. I don't know if you've been following the news, but I think in Sweden we had a soft opening, so I can work 2 days a week at the headquarters. But then I think we did this using Power Apps, which is great, by the way. We developed this app where we need to sign in. So because we want to limit the number of employees that are working in the same space. So to keep the distance. So I think we've done I would say our facilities done great work to of course this is a team effort to really have a very secure soft opening that is keeping you safe, right? But you still can connect with colleagues and meet. So that's a bit our approach.
Great suggestion.
Oh, excuse me.
Oh no, I one. Who wants to go first?
I'm going first. Is that all right, Tariq? Cool. I think it's a really interesting challenge. I think we're going to have lots of ups and downs, particularly as, like with the UK, the guidance and the law on how to approach life during the pandemic goes through different iterations. For me, one of the core questions, which I'm mentioning because I feel it perhaps doesn't get the attention it deserves, is around how do you keep that sense of team? How do you keep those personal connections going when, you know, it's been 6 months now, it might end up being longer. We may never be, you know, all together all the time in the way that we have been. So as someone in a leadership position, that's the thing that I'm most concerned with. And how can we keep that personal connection? How can we keep the sense of us as a team, as colleagues, of people who are working together, even when we are apart, and how technology can help us do this. So, for example, one of the things that my team and I, my leadership colleagues, are doing is every week we record a video. It's ideal for me because I get to live out like my YouTube vlogger dreams, just like having a chat with everyone about what's been going on. It's less comfortable for some members of the team. They don't enjoy doing them so much. But how can we use technology, as well as, you know, doing the infrastructure and enabling us to do our job, to help us keep that sense of connection when we're not able to be together in person?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you there. And from my side, I'll kind of take it from a different angle. And I think this is the time now for you to build your business case. If you don't have an employee experience roles or function, this is the time to do it. You know, this is where you prove employee experience directly impacts your customer experience, which directly impacts your shareholders. So this is that nugget there is what you need to be building on. If you haven't already started to do that, try and start small. Build employee experience lenses into certain roles, into certain departments. If you've got an IT team that's quite prevalent in pushing out change, have they got employee advocates in there? Maybe start, you know, getting people from HR to work closely. You know, you can't boil the ocean with these things. You have to kind of start small. And even the principles of Agile, just those 12 principles of Agile around trusting your employees, you know, getting small teams that release quickly, things like that, where a lot of legacy companies aren't doing that at the moment. So really those 3 areas: build your business case, start getting the advocacy and the employee lens on delivery, and then start to work in a more of an agile framework, I think are the 3 takeaways for me.
Brilliant. Amazing. That was, I couldn't have picked a better panel. This is really interesting. It's great for me, especially as someone who engages organizations, talk about technology, to hear this insight, and I'm hoping it's been really useful for the audience as well. So I think probably on that note, let's kind of wrap up there. And a big thanks to Tariq, Rebecca, and Ralf. Thanks for joining us today. Yeah, I hope the rest of the sessions go well today. If you ever need any kind of conversations around how Google's doing EUC and how we can help organizations, and I'm sure there's contact details throughout the day, but feel free to add me on LinkedIn or whatever is comfortable for you. And with that, I'll hand back to Chris. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.